makes glutathione. It also has a protein called casein, which produces dopamine. Now, most kids today, most parents who have learning difficulties in their children know that dairy is really hard for them to digest. That's why this is undenatured whey protein, undenatured casein protein. That means it's not heat processed with pasteurization, high heat process. That kills the actual proteins to make them so they're not available to the brain. But even still, the casein is hard for these children to digest. All these kids have digestive problems. And so what happens is, what I figured out is this amazing formula is you take your undenatured whey protein. That means it's not killed by the high heat. Then you add enzymes to it. I have a premix with enzymes already in it. And you add water to it and let it sit for 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. It will bubble up and it will digest itself, so it becomes pre-digested whey protein, casein protein, the perfect mix in order to produce glutathione, which neutralizes free radicals, and the prerequisites, the amino acids, are now digested to make dopamine and serotonin in the brain.
I love it. And for everybody out there listening, you can go to John's website, which is www.marsvenus.com, and he has a lot of information about this, because I know that right now we're getting a ton of information. I know some of you are out there, you're driving, you can't write all of this stuff down. Afterwards, it's an easy website to go to, marsvenus.com, or you can always go to the Answers for the Family website. We will have, a way that you can connect to do that. We're going to take a break right now, but everybody stay with us. Or if you're sitting at your computer, open up another window, follow along, go to marsvenus.com, and as John's talking about some of this, you can follow along with us. But stay with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to Answers for the Family.
Founded over 30 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield has continually focused on resolving issues that negatively impact families and businesses. Our signature therapeutic transportation service helps to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely transported to specialized schools, programs, and treatment centers with unsurpassed experience and success. We are supported by our full-service licensed investigation agency that has legally, professionally, and compassionately located hundreds of runaways and teens. We are experienced and qualified to help, offering solutions which may include referrals to our international network of top professionals in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, psychiatry, and investigations. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services and West Shield Investigations are the best solutions when your family is facing a personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 1-800-899-8585. Or visit our website at westshield.com. Thank you.
And we're back. You're listening to Answers for the Family. Our guest today is Dr. John Gray, author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And we are talking about some of his other books, one of which is Staying Focused in a Hyper World. Now, John, in that book, you talk a lot about reaching like a greater consciousness. So, I mean, what do you mean when you say we have a greater consciousness of new possibilities, but we feel less connected in our relationships due to our loss of focus? Let's talk about this loss of focus that is affecting all of us.
When we lose focus, we start to value those things which are not important, as opposed to valuing those things that are important. See, focus is what we put our attention on, right? So if we don't have a clear focus on what's most important, what happens is now we're left with a void, and we keep seeking stimulation from things that aren't important, which become like addiction. And everything I've said about brain function and focus actually is a wonderful, wonderful solution for addiction. It all comes down to, even the way I figured out the solution for Parkinson's, I'd gone to Mexico to test out a alternative treatment for people with addictions. Because addictions is, once again, it's a dopamine challenge. It's where dopamine is the brain chemical that gives your brain pleasure and motivation. And when you have low dopamine function, Then you take something, some substance that stimulates super high levels of dopamine function, like cocaine or heroin or alcohol for some people. Then your brain makes you feel alive. You feel like you're supposed to feel to a certain extent. This aliveness, but you didn't make it yourself. And by high stimulation of dopamine, then it goes into another problem, which is desensitizing your dopamine receptors. That means that if you have high stimulation, then normal stimulation doesn't give you any dopamine, which makes you crave now higher stimulation, and the higher stimulation desensitizes the dopamine receptors, which means that life becomes even more boring, more flat, less alive, and depending on your temperament, you have ADHD-type symptoms, which would be hyper symptoms, either hyperactive, hyper-distracted, hypersensitive, hyper-compulsive, hyper-perfectionist, hyper-denial. Any normal human challenge becomes a hyper-challenge, and that's what we live in today, is a hyper-challenge. Women have always, had this more expanded awareness, which, takes in worries a bit more than men. But now it's like hyper. Women constantly are feeling overwhelmed. It's like a world they live in. There's never enough time. They can't find the energy to feel happy. They're overwhelmed. And not that every woman, but this is a common theme that as a therapist I see today, and my thousands of people I meet. It's become a part of our culture, so much so that the younger generation doesn't even know the difference. I mean, watch a movie that was made in 1940, and you'll be bored to death. But those people were very excited by it. They had a sensitivity to the peacefulness of life. Now, if you sort of relax, you feel bored. You have to have the TV on. You have to have loud music on. You have to be playing a video game. You have to be looking at your phone. This is our addictive world we live in, and it prevents us from having a certain level of depth and fulfillment in our relationships, and it prevents us from accessing that a desire for that which is most important, which is intimacy, which is vitality, which is health, which is happiness, simplicity. Our lives have become complex, not because life has to be so complex, it's we make it that way because we're seeking this high stimulation of danger, of overwhelm. Ironically, the things we don't want often also stimulate dopamine. Pleasure does, sugar, sweets, desserts, eating, sex, all these kinds of things produce dopamine. But so does fear. So does danger. When we look at these poor kids who are in who are in gangs and do dangerous things and steal and hurt people, all of that is also an addictive substance. It literally, the brain becomes addicted to that. Worrying, the brain becomes addicted to it. Drama, we see it most dramatically in our soldiers that come back. 'Cause when you're in the war zone, your dopamine levels shoot really, really high. It's aliveness, when you're in danger, you're fully alive. And then that produces cocaine levels of dopamine that desensitizes dopamine receptors. And now they come back and they're depressed, they're not motivated, their world is flat. There's no aliveness and there's depression, and they often commit more suicides than people die in the war. And that's because, they're basically not happy. They can't find the capacity to feel aliveness with normal life. And we talk about these kids at risk. We do that so much in the Boy Crisis book, and there's so many different factors for that, but one of the major factors is, as I mentioned, this lithium. Lithium is literally anybody who's like depressive and suicidal. It is the mineral deficiency that gives rise to suicide feelings. You can have lots of problems but not want to kill yourself. But when you have lithium deficiency, literally brain cells are dying in your brain and you feel like you want to die. And any child, even close to depression or anxiety or suicidal, should be taking 25 milligrams of lithium orotate. That's the element lithium, plus there'll be 400 milligrams of orotic acid. It's just every little capsule usually has 4.5 milligrams of lithium. And that would be for emergency situations, but a daily dose is like 4.5 milligrams. That's a tiny, tiny bit bonded to orotic acid. I prefer the supermineral product, which is has the lithium along with the potassium orotate, calcium orotate, magnesium orotate, zinc orotate. what I found is that over time, people feel better right away with lithium orotate, but the results are not always sustained because when your brain goes to a higher level of functioning, you now are working, you can easily become depleted in the other cofactor minerals. You also need sunshine, vitamin D, you also need greens, you need vitamin K2. These are all factors in working a trillion times a second in the brain. So much activity is going on. These nutrients are needed. And our lives are so out of balance with the high stress levels, the speed of life, the seeking of stimulation, the addictive tendencies we talked about. All of these things deplete brain minerals. And then now we're seeking the stimulation. We're coming from a void, which just, we find it, by looking at new and different, or worrying thoughts, violent thoughts, angry thoughts, any of those kind of things stimulate higher levels of dopamine, which just depletes us even more.
And John, how much is the media perpetuating this with the levels of negativity and hyperness? Because the hyperness, it's from the standpoint now is, if it's going to be 90 degrees in Southern California, it's going to be incredibly hot. It's going to be dangerously hot. Well, 20 years ago, 90 degrees wasn't dangerously hot, but now it's dangerously hot. If there's going to be rain, there's going to be this huge storm. Get off the streets. Okay, it was rain. It was rain 20 years ago. Now it's a storm. Everything seems to be raised to this higher level. How much of what the media is doing is keeping us at this level, which is adding to the stress or the ADHD that we're all feeling?
Well, yes, and our own ADHD feeds it. The media goes where people put their attention, and people become bored. If you had a station just had good news, nobody would watch it. They're just responding. The media is responding to our need for flashy, new, and different, and then it bumps it up, and then that makes us need more flashy news and different. I mean, they figured it out. They want people to watch their shows and whatever, and so, yeah, that feeds it. I just love it. My work is I get to travel a lot in my work, and like, for example, I just got back from 9 days in China, and when I'm in China, none of the TVs are in English, so I don't watch any TV. It's so refreshing to be able to come home without this need to look at the news and what's happening, the drama, the excitement. Your brain just wants to go to it, and if you just turn it off and don't see it, then you adjust. And that's something I haven't mentioned that I mentioned in Boy Crisis, which is one of the solutions, which is anybody can recognize, is with this ADD-type symptom and all these problems that come from imbalanced brain function. High stimulation is a part of our life. If it doesn't have to damage the brain, if we follow it with low stimulation. See, it's like dopamine stimulation is like if you look into the sun, your pupils will constrict. But if you go back into darkness, your pupils will open up again. It's the same thing with these neural receptors in the brain. If you have high dopamine stimulation, something exciting happens, you have a nice dessert or whatever, yeah, a lot of dopamine gets produced, and now your receptor sites will close down. Now you'd have to experience a relaxation. This is why meditation is now being taught in schools. It's such a good thing. Mm-hmm. To relax, to meditate is a really good thing. And it's kind of like disciplined boredom until people learn to upregulate those receptor sites again. And then what people normally experience as boredom is actually peace, relaxation and peace of mind. Many people don't even know what that means. They either bored or they have to be stimulated. But meditation is something that people can do. Talking about feelings, particularly for girls, is very, very important. Is not to get stuck in just the feelings, but to articulate and feel the emotions that go with the feelings. That's a new concept for many people. But it's the emotions that balance the hormones, not the feeling. Feeling is a doorway. You could say, I feel like nobody likes me. All right, that is not going to increase your estrogen, maybe a little bit, because somebody's listening to you. But if you say, I feel sad that my friend didn't listen to me at all, you feel an emotion, then that means your estrogen levels are going up. That's why we have to learn that for boys, if they're getting emotional, they need to temporarily take time to not talk, instead do something. Talking when you're emotional only increases estrogen, and boys can easily go over to the emotional side, be angry and throw tantrums and whatever, and what they need is not to ask them more questions and whatever, but to distract them from their emotions temporarily, get them to do something that they're good at. This is why boys need sports, they need activities, and girls need them too. But I'm just saying for boys, for their emotional balance and